Good morning. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very proud and honored to have such an amazing panel here in my place, Café Luitpold. Dear ministers, dear Secretary of State, dear guests, dear friends, it is an enormous pleasure to welcome you this morning, right after the Munich Security Conference. Our topic could hardly be more timely, more important, I think. Overcoming the geopolitical and geoeconomic challenges of our times, the role of Weimarer Triangle for Europe. We meet at the moment of rupture, even after the unexpected laugh fest yesterday on Valentine's Day, 24 hours ago, thanks to Secretary Rubio's speech. War has returned to Europe. Economic interdependence has become weaponized. Energy, supply chains, defense capabilities, technological sovereignty all have become strategic questions. And in this environment, Europe is under pressure to act not only rhetorically but structurally. This brings us to a format that has existed for more than 3 decades, sometimes visible, sometimes dormant, the Weimarer Triangle. To begin with, I want to ask all of you, who knows specifics about the Weimarer Triangle? Please raise the hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, impressive. That was actually my fear, but we may change that today with our discussion. And actually, I will ask you at the end if you believe that the Weimarer Triangle could be decisive after you had listened to our talk. So let us remember that we have maybe to keep in mind the Weimarer Triangle. So today we will structure the conversation in 3 parts. We start with an assessment. Where do we stand? What is the aspiration? What is reality? And the political coordination between Paris, Berlin, and Warschau. Second, fault lines. Where are these strategic divergences, different threat perceptions, economic priorities, energy pathways, transatlantic reflexes? And third, capacity for action. This will be not a technocratic discussion, nor can it be exhaustive. It's about political will, structure, strategic culture, Europeans' ability to shape its own future. So, let us warmly welcome our distinguished guests. Caroline.
So, a warm welcome also from my side. First of all, welcome to you, Benjamin Haddad, the Minister Delegate for European Affairs of France. Wojciech Wrochna, the Secretary of State for Strategic Energy Infrastructure of Poland. And Gunther Krichbaum, who is the Minister of State for Europe at the Federal Foreign Office of Germany. A warm welcome from my side. Thank you for being here. And before we begin with the discussion, let me maybe briefly introduce the 2 of us as moderators. First of all, thank you so much for having us, Dr. Stefan Meyer. He is since 15 years now the host of Salon Luitpold, but mainly works with his company, eKairos, at the intersection of technological innovation and democratic participation. For years, he has developed formats that strengthen European dialogue, particularly between France and Germany.
Caroline Hofstadt is co-founder of the Democratic Spin, a political communications consultancy for democratic impact. She has gained personal and professional experience in the European Parliament, in the Bundestag, and in media outlets. So I will frame the broader geopolitical context. Assessment. The Weimarer Triangle was founded in '91, so we have to make a sort of deep dive now to make you really know what we are talking about. It's about shared responsibility between Germany, France, and Poland for shaping Europe's future. Since 2014, however, the triangle has largely played a symbolic role regarding Ukraine. After Russia's annexion of Crimea, key diplomacy shifted to the Normandy format without Poland, but with Ukraine and Russia. So, as a result, the Weimarer Triangle lost wait. Only after 22, the full-scale invasion of Russia in Ukraine, we listened once again to Poland, and the regained strategic relevance become clear. But at the same time, there was this new informal security core, the E3 between France, UK, and Germany, as a informal security core. So, dear Minister Benjamin Haddad, let's start to jump in questions. It may be provocative, but did we choose the right title for today's talk? Should we not rather be asking, when does Weimar become Weimar plus one? Or let's call it de facto E4?
First, thank you so much for having me, and I'm impressed by this beautiful space. It's great to have this conversation here. You know, why did we build the Weimar Triangle? Basically because, of course, we had the Franco-German friendship, reconciliation, a driver for Europe for half a century. And then, of course, we had the momentum with the enlargement, which I would call the reunification of the European family, after dozens of millions of inhabitants were left behind the Iron Curtain under totalitarianism, and which brought in dynamic new members, and especially Poland. You see a country like Poland has high growth, that takes military and strategic issues very seriously. They're a very important spender in military affairs, that of course is on the first line against the Russian threat. And with whom, I speak from a French perspective, we had such a deep and long historical and cultural relationship. You know, you go to Warsaw, you have a statue of Napoleon and de Gaulle. I don't think there's a lot of European capitals where you can see this. We have shared figures like Chopin, whose heart is in the Cathedral of Warsaw and his body is at Père Lachaise Cemetery in Paris. Figures like Marie Curie. The reason I'm saying this is because I think for a long time, part of this shared history, and thus the shared responsibility for Europe, was a little forgotten, at least in France. And I think there was a really renewed momentum in the last few years to deepen this partnership with Poland, with Central European countries, and of course to do it with our German friends, because we're at the moment where we need European unity and strength. We have the Russian aggression against Ukraine on our border, and more generally, the threat that Russia represents to all of our democracies through its cyber attacks, its interference, its air incursions. We have questions arising about the future of the transatlantic relationship and the security guarantee from the US. And so we need to take ownership for our security. And the best way to do it is to do it with our partners. And now to finish just with your specific question on E4 with the UK, of course we need to work with the Brits. And this is the reason why, even if they're not in the European Union anymore, which we regret, but we respect, it's the sovereign choice of the British people. Of course, if we want to build a common European strategic identity, we have every interest to work with the UK. This is why when we decide to create the coalition of the willing to support Ukraine, but also to think about the security guarantees for the day after a ceasefire, we decided to do with Prime Minister Starmer and with the UK, because it's a P5 member, it's a nuclear power, it's a very serious strategic player, and so we have all the interest to anchor Britain as much as possible to the European security architecture.
So it's actually to make UK fit in informal structures, not about letting Poland actually aside. But you may just answer for that after my question for your secretary, Wrochna. Isn't the difference between Germany and Poland compared to France too big? When we speak about de Gaulle, who has actually tried and successfully tried to become completely independent of America in security matters, and Germany and especially Poland did the other way. So would it not be very helpful for you guys to be part of the E4?
From my side also, great thanks for the invitation. And
you're willing, actually. E4 means willing.
Yeah. I'll answer the question. I wanted to thank you for the invitation first. It's a great place, of course, and Getting back to your question, yes, I mean, Poland is a very particular place in Europe when it comes to the relations with the US. We had very briefly discussion before we started the debate here, and maybe I'll repeat it because it's a very interesting information. You probably all know that Warsaw is the biggest Polish city, but the second largest Polish city in terms of Polish citizen is Chicago in the U.S. So there is over 1 million Poles living in, I mean, people with Polish origins living in Chicago. So apparently the ties between Poland and America are close and will remain close. But we are in a very particular moment in our history. And of course, we are all speaking about the rising tension between Europe and the US, especially with the Trump administration. And my perspective is that at the G2G level, so if you work government to government, the relations are really okay. So I can say that it's more business as usual. So in the energy cooperation, in the intelligence cooperation, in military cooperation, it works pretty well. But I think we all see that there is a certain particular moment in Europe when we need to build our internal European strength. We need to work more closely. We need to build our autonomy. Because the times are very difficult.
We are coming to all that, but
and
talking about Weimar and E3,
yeah,
E4.
And answering your question, that even if historically France was trying to be, and I think still is trying to be more independent from the America ties that Germany and Poland. At the end of the day, we need a common shared future, and independently of how we see the US, we need to build, first of all, our European strength.
But is Poland on the way to become independent from the US?
I think yes. I mean, if you hear what Polish Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Affairs Minister is saying, he's very tough on the U.S. government. So I do, and he's keeping repeating that we need to be independent. We need to be build our autonomy. But again, I do believe that the transatlantic relations are by far the closest comparing to the other parts of the world. I mean, America, as Rubio has said yesterday, is, and that's a quote, child of Europe. I mean, we still share common values. We are culturally very close. They will remain our ally.
So you believe Rubio? Okay.
Yes,
okay.
I do.
Okay. Okay. So, and you have not on the highest priorities to join E4, whatever we call it.
No, I mean,
okay. It's okay. So we continue.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Minister Krichbaum, it's an honor to have you. I gained the perspective the last 3 days. I have set up over 20 panels here. I have had the opportunity to speak to Ben Rhodes, to a whole bunch of very, very insightful people. And some voices told me, ask them about the future of Europe. And so I'm asking you, will there be a future of Europe after the presidential elections in spring in France, parliamentary vote in Poland, same year, autumn, and after 8 state elections in Germany? Will we have the EU on the long run?
Of course, but first of all, thank you very much for the invitation this morning, which I followed together with my friends here from France and Poland. And your first question was also, what about the triangle of Weimar? Of course, it has also a future. And why these 3 states? France, Poland, and Germany. We are not the only states in Europe that are important states, but not the only states in Europe. And so we have different formats. We have also Weimar Plus and so on. E3 was mentioned with Great Britain because we have an interest to a close partnership also to countries outside of the European Union. And the reason and the background is, if Poland if France and Germany will not agree, nothing will move ahead in European Union. That's the background. And so it is so important to have a close partnership. But it is not exclusive, it is inclusive, and I mentioned the different formats where we invite also other states to join. This is important. Now, coming back to your question and also about security and the future of European Union. Yes, we have to face elections in different states, Poland included. And, well, let me say, I don't know what happens next. Neither in Germany, neither in France, neither in Poland or in other states. But what I know is things will not become easier. And that's what I mean when we say, well, we should not waste the time now. My experience, I'm now since almost 24 years in the parliament, in the German parliament. And my political experience is also that in negotiation processes, the time is not wasted at the end, but at the beginning. And we are talking about the so-called MFF. I think nobody will know about it. It's the framework, the financial framework for the next 7 years. Very, very complicated. But what we can achieve now, it's done. And we don't know about the outcome of the elections in France. We don't know about the outcome of the elections in Poland. And I don't know about the outcome in the so-called Länder, in the states of Germany, what will happen next. And because the Bundesrat has also a certain meaning and a certain saying in Germany. So, not wasting the time. Security, last point. I think in general, Europe has to become more independent. Not only in security questions, also in trade relations. We have a deep interest to diversify more. So not to become independent from China, but to diversify more with the so-called ASEAN states where we are negotiating free trade agreements. And I see also former Ambassador Mr. Sabatil here among us because he was specialized in trade affairs. But this concerns Mercosur, this concerns ASEAN, and in security questions, sorry, I have to say it as a footnote, I listened very carefully to Rubio yesterday. The package was nicer than in the case of GD Van, but the content remained the same. And I was not able to stood up from my place at the end of his speech. I remained seated.
One of the few, okay.
One of the few.
Okay, but let's, before Karin starts over, so you do not share this misconception that liberal democracy, free trade, and rule-based institution could replace national interests. Actually, this is one of the messages Rubio gave us, that we have to forget about rule-based order. Free trade will never last, and so democracy has to be reinterpreted.
Well, for me, it has nothing to do with a rule-based order. If one country is asking for the territory of another country in NATO, I have another interpretation and I made other experiences with a world and rule-based order. And this we have to respect. And this is really, believe me, the main advantage of Europe and European Union. We have to be more progressive. We have a huge economic weight in the world, but looking on the political dimension, there's a little bit space above us. And this we have to use in the future, and then I think we have enough reasons to be self-conscious enough in the world, because otherwise we should not forget the motto of this big Munich Security Conference, under destruction. Why it was chosen? Under destruction. And I'm in favor of under construction. And this will be our task for European Union and for Germany, and together with France and Poland.
Thank you, Minister Krichbaum. I couldn't agree more, and I definitely agree with the fact that we need a stronger Europe, and I think that we can hear this in every speech at the Munich Security Conference. But as already last year, I think there's always this question between aspiration and reality, like to which extent is this actual possible? And when we're talking about the Weimar Triangle, in moments like this of profound geopolitical change, these formats carry really significant expectations to provide leadership and coordination, especially within Europe. And I think the new subject here, or like the new chapter in this talk should be, how close is the Weimarer Triangle today to fulfilling this role in practice? And Minister Haddad, I would love to start with a question to you. Do you see the Weimarer Triangle today primarily as a symbolic format or as a concrete instrument for shaping European policy?
No, it has to be concrete, because it's a format that allows us to converge our views on what we want to do. But as Gunther said, it's not exclusive of other relationships, because we're 27 and we need to move forward together. But you know, I agree that there's a lot to be done in terms of concrete actions to continue the rearmament of Europe and coordinate more so that we avoid fragmentation and duplication on our national defense spending. When it comes to investing in our competitiveness, integrating on single market that is still too fragmented, supporting our innovators and our entrepreneurs in AI, in quantum, in cyber, in space, where we have incredible talent, but just let's give them the opportunity to go to scale and conquer the world and build the European sovereignty of tomorrow. But I also want to be optimistic and proud of what we've accomplished even in the last year. I remember exactly a year ago, we had the J.D. Vance speech at the Munich Security Conference, and a few days later, we had the meeting between President Zelensky, President Trump, and Vice President Vance in the Oval Office. And I remember at the time, everyone said, Ukraine is going to be forced into capitulation in 24 hours by a deal signed by the United States and Russia without Europeans. Where are we a year later? A year later, Europeans are now providing the support for Ukraine. In December, we voted at the European Council a 90 billion euro package to give visibility to Ukrainians for the next few years on both military and economic support. We built the coalition The Willing as a response also to this, to say, how do we coordinate our support for for Ukraine as Europeans, with like-minded partners, by the way, with the UK, with Canada, with Australia, with Japan. This is a concrete example of Europeans taking ownership for their own security. And how do we think about the day after if there's a peace agreement or a ceasefire, so that we provide security guarantees by continuing to support the Ukrainian army and maybe putting boots on the ground, which is something that was unthinkable just a few years before. But now we changed the mindset and said, okay, we're ready to take responsibility. So I know that it's very popular to go into European self-bashing or to give in to the bashing coming from outside of the European Union. And there's a lot of homework to continue to do. And by the way, I think this conference gave it a good example of this. I mean, I did roundtable after roundtable on what we can do on space, how we can continue with enlargement, how we can structure our European defense markets. But let's be proud of how we reacted to events in the last year, in the last 4 years, by the way, when you look at the beginning of Russian aggression against Ukraine, and let's accelerate.
I really love the optimistic approach. And coming back to the Weimarer Triangle, maybe in a few words, if the Weimarer Triangle were founded today, what would be its purpose?
I think its purpose would be a couple things. I mean, clearly, as I said, shaping a common agenda when it comes to the competitiveness and prosperity of Europe, and bringing together our ecosystems in AI and quantum and innovation. Having a common vision for our security, and it starts with supporting Ukraine. But beyond that, and maybe it's a little more abstract, but I think it's really key, it's building trust and building knowledge and listening to each other and understanding our perspectives. You know, I'm pro-European, but I'm not a federalist, in the sense that I defend the French national interest. I come from a French perspective. And I think one of the most interesting things about my mission is that we are 27 member states, each with our history, our culture, our geography, our tradition and institutions. And part of this is understanding the perspective of others and how we can create a common European interest and common European strategic perspective by bringing together these cultures. And I think when you have countries that have a rich history, a rich strategic tradition, I think bringing together and converging and getting just to know each other better and to build a common European identity, I think that's also one of the keys of something like the Weimar Triangle.
And thank you. And to you, Secretary Wrochna. Where do you see by now the main obstacles that have prevented deeper coordination in between the Weimarer Triangle so far?
I think that the Weimar Triangle is a format that is working quite well at the ministerial level. And of course, there were periods when we haven't been meeting so often. It also depends who's governing at the particular time in the three of the capitals. But I think it's at the ministerial, at the political level, this format plays a good role while shaping the cooperation, integration, and the European agenda in general. But to make it really working better, we need a deeper cooperation at the lower level. And it was raised here, and it's very important. The three big countries like Germany, France, and Poland are big enough that can shape the European agenda. Of course, we cannot forget that we are 27 in the EU. So we need to also think about the particularities and the interest of all our European friends. But I think that nowadays we are in a very particular moment at the EU because the world is changing very fast and Europe needs to act quickly and fast. And the EU governance is very complex. If we only keep the role of the European Commission, the European Parliament, and the Council, as we have been seeing for the over last years, it's not enough to move the European agenda. So what we need a closer cooperation between the capitals to push for changes, to push for more well-targeted integration, and this is the role of the capitals. The European Commission, it's not the European government. It is a European institution that is governing Europe, but it's not the European government. We need strong European governments to put a pace to the European integration and to define the agenda. Sometimes, especially now, very detailed agenda, and require European Commission to put the legislative proposals and to act accordingly. And for that, and let's take the example of the European energy integration. We all know that France is a nuclear country with a large nuclear fleet. We know that Germany has decided to shift out from nuclear, and it's pushing its decarbonization and renewable agenda. And you know that Poland has a very particular situation, being very long dependent on coal, and this is a transition you cannot make from one day to another. But we are trying to be pragmatic. We are developing renewables. We are developing nuclear. So this is a very good illustration that we have completely different approaches, and we need to find a solution to accommodate these three visions within the European Union, within the European energy market, and within our climate targets and the decarbonization agenda. The European energy design market is very particular, and as I said, it needs to accommodate the three visions, especially that according to the treaty, the energy policy is only coordinated at the EU level. So here I can give a very good example that in order to deliver, we need to work not only at the ministerial level, but we need to dig further and find solution at the business level, at the ministry. I mean, at the level when the ministry is working accordingly. And I have a good example. For example, very recently, the 3 TSO, so transmission system operators, from the energy sector, so that's why I'm giving these examples. The 3 TSOs from our respective member states have decided to run a grid study that will, at the end of the day, give some results and show also to the European Commission how better integrate a European energy market. So that's what we need. Of course, the discussion as we were having today are very important when we meet at the ministerial level, but we need deeper discussions, deeper proposals, and then working with the European Commission and other member states to deliver.
So you would say, in general, we need more coordination or cooperation on a lower level. And maybe to you, Minister Krichbaum, where would you agree with Secretary Wrochna and where would you disagree? And especially from the German perspective, what does it need for the Weimarer Triangle to work more closely and work more efficiently together?
What should the Triangle of Weimar achieve? 3 keywords: security, competitivity, and more investments in AI, in technique, in innovation. Starting with security. We discussed a long time if we should achieve the 2% of the GDP goal, yes or no. What we promised, by the way, on the NATO summit in Wales a couple of years ago. Poland, since years, invested much more, almost 5% today. So, goodbye arrogant from the German side. Other countries did more in the past because they had a much more realistic picture from Russia. Today, we are one step wider. Second point, competitivity. I think our countries are on the same page. What I mean, reduction of bureaucracy, energy prices, which can compete especially towards the United States, once again. A lot of things which could be mentioned in this framework. Technique, third point, innovation, because this will be the source of the welfare in the next 5, 10, 20 years. There we have to invest. Or to give you a certain picture, if we invented the European Union totally new today, theoretically, we would not start with agriculture once again. It was right in the last half of the last century, of course. It was absolutely right, because if there is a lack of nurture, it can cause tensions. But today, the real challenges are others. And these we have to face. This is the real competition. And there we have to invest much more than in the past to compete with the rest of the world.
Let me just jump into that, because actually agriculture will be the proving point that Weimar works. Because if Ukraine is joining one day, hopefully soon, France, Ukraine, Poland have completely different economies. How would you make the EU digest these huge agricultural complexes?
This is one example why also in the case of Ukraine, there will not be a fast-track procedure.
What does this mean? What does this mean?
I can tell you a bit, because it's discussed. Now it is necessary that Ukraine should become member of European Union best yesterday than today. This is not realistic. And I'm not in politics to promise something which cannot be fulfilled. I know very well about the procedure of accession, and it has not only to do with security. It has a lot to do with other points which will be negotiated. These negotiations will take time, and it is finally, it's a little bit technique now, that the state which wants to come in the European Union has to adapt the whole acquis communautaire. That means all the laws, also environmental protection and so on.
But Zelensky is already asking for a date, and France will not be able to make a vote to make that Ukraine becomes a member.
I'm very clear on this point. Not the calendar is fulfilling the criteria, only the fulfillment of the criteria of Copenhagen. And these criteria have to be fulfilled. This does not mean that we cannot give credible perspectives for Ukraine. Okay. So this is one argument more why we need a gradually integration, which is not the case today. We have another methodology. But why we need it, step by step, let's take Ukraine by the hand. And of course we have to support them. But this cannot mean to promise the country that they will come in European Union next year. All the other states with which we are negotiating, and the Balkans, Montenegro, Serbia, the people there must have the feeling to live in the wrong country. This cannot be that we have not different standards. So there are absolutely models how to integrate Ukraine step by step, but agriculture is one example. By the way, I only want to remember when we had blockades of the farmers at the borderline at the border of Ukraine. You remember very well these pictures. And we have to communicate also all these models to the rest of the people, to the citizens. Otherwise, we will lose the people. And then you can forget the European project. So a lot of things have to be convinced. And let me say, this cannot happen from one day to the other one. And last remark towards Ukraine. Ukraine needs our full solidarity. Germany showed a lot of solidarity, and also in a financial and military dimension. But let me say, finally, Ukraine does not only need a kind of peace, they need security. Sure. This is the core question now at the moment, and this security we have to give to Ukraine.
Okay, so you're saying we do enough solidarity to Ukraine. Moritz Schulerik.
It's different.
Just a second. Moritz Schulerik, the director of the Kiel Institute for Weltwirtschaft, one of the 5 top economists of Germany, just told us that Germany is giving 1.5% of GDP for Ukraine. And the most of this money stays in Germany to pay Bürgergeld. So, and in France it's even worse. Poland is doing a great job. Are we having enough solidarity towards Ukraine?
First remark, what I say now has nothing to do with the Bürgergeld for those people who are living here, but we are giving in total, and we gave 75 billion euro.
It's the same amount that we give for subsidies in diesel. Same amount for diesel subsidies.
It's the military aid. And Germany is doing the most in Europe.
Absolute numbers.
And
absolute numbers, not relative numbers. Absolute numbers.
Absolutely right, relatively. In both categories, Germany is ahead, and not neglecting that other nations are engaged in other corners of the world. When I look especially on France, what France is doing in Africa, in African states, should not be neglected, especially when I see the role of the United States with US aid and so on. So everybody is doing everything. But here, especially in the case of Ukraine, Germany is doing a lot, and it is also seen and appreciated by Ukraine, of course.
Okay, sorry for being harsh.
Not at all.
Secretary Wrochna, okay, so I can go further. Secretary Wrochna, so actually you are now the front state. You have been felt sidelined. You are one of the highest defense spenders of NATO. How would you, have you any perspective you would share how we can reconcile NATO primacy? At the same time, we call for European strategic autonomy. How can we put this together? And maybe you can also bring in the NATO 3.0 aspect.
It's a very important question, but I'd like to concur that I totally agree that we need to help Ukraine. We need to help them each and every day, however we can. But thinking about integrating them entirely with the EU in the coming months or even years is an illusion. And we need to be realistic that it's too complex, and yeah, we need to be clear about that. But coming to your question, I think that, and it was already said even here today, that the stronger we are, the better we will be cooperating with our American allies. So the first step is to make our military presence, our economic strength as a priority, and being in a better shape, we will be able to speak to our US partners with a stronger voice. This is first. The second, Poland has shown that spending 3%, 4%, 5% of GDP for the military is possible. Of course, we do understand.
Do we need more money in only European structures?
Of course. And when it comes to defense?
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
Okay. So we have to buy Rafale.
I mean, we...
Yes, I heard yes. Maybe French clients.
Being autonomous means that we're, let's say, first investing much more in our military. And of course, we build also our possibilities to produce ammunition, to produce military equipment here in Europe.
I just remembered, I have not prepared that, but when did President Macron say that NATO is brain dead? When was that?
It was in 2019 in the Economist interview.
Where are we now?
Well, look, you know, France is an active member of NATO and of the alliance. And if you look at the last 4 years, in many respects, the alliance has gotten stronger. We have 2 new members, Sweden and Finland, and this has clearly contributed to the collective security of Europe and to the strategic degradation of the position of Russia, by the way. You know, they wanted to dismantle NATO. They have 2 new NATO members. We have reassurance missions in the Baltic states, in Poland, in Romania. But what's clear is that we need to take more ownership for our own security and defense. And this is why member states are increasing their defense spending. Poland, Germany clearly are. France, over the 2 terms of the Macron presidency, will have doubled its defense spending, and we need to continue and accelerate.
But the dependence on US tech is coming down, actually.
I was going to say something about this. We need to do it more at the European level. So basically what we did last year, I think, is a good example of what we should do more. The SAFE program, it's a 150 billion euro loan from the European Commission that basically says what? We look at the areas where we have shortages in capabilities, cyber, drones, ammunition, long-range strikes, air defense compared to others, especially compared to the US. And we say to Europeans, we will loan you money if you cooperate together, if you have companies cross borders, countries cross borders that cooperate to invest and procure in these areas to be able to reduce our dependency. We need to do much more. Invest. Gunther mentioned the multi-annual financial framework, the European budget. Yeah. We need to do it, and we need a more ambitious budget. We need to do it, and my president was very clear, even by borrowing on the markets, with Eurobonds maybe to invest in defense and AI in quantum. And we need to do it to support our European champions. Yeah. Why? Because, number one, look, we just passed a budget in France. We're cutting spending in lots of areas, which is important to reduce our deficit. We continue to increase the defense spending. What am I going to tell my voters if I say, I'm going to increase your defense spending, I'm going to cut spending elsewhere, and it's going to subsidize a factory in Kentucky? It makes no sense. You're never going to get support for this. And beyond that, from a more strategic standpoint, you know that when you buy weapons coming from external sources like the US, there are fine prints attached on the use, on the export, on keeping the technological know-how. If we want to be able to stand on our own 2 feet, we need our own defense industry. We need our own technological champions, and we need to support them with the European money. And the last point I would say, to go back to NATO about this, I'm convinced that this is the best way in the long run to reshape and salvage the transatlantic relationship in a much more balanced and mature way. There's no contradiction between saying we want an autonomous and independent Europe and saying we want a strong relationship with the United States. Because right now, when you have asymmetry, when you have dependencies, that creates frustration and resentment on both sides of the Atlantic. And so if you show that you have a strong and willing to act partner able to stand on their own two feet, that's the best way to have an alliance. Not domination, not vassality.
I absolutely agree, but how we may have to consolidate not our defense industries, and it may be hurtful, including difficult decisions on national champions. I don't say the word, if this plane we are talking about all the days. How can we overcome and become faster on the level of champions we have on both sides in different areas, but also bringing startups in the game? Actually, I planned to put a drone, a Helsing drone, but they didn't give it to me, unfortunately. Just to show you the newest technology. But yesterday, I had a panel with Baroness Ashton and a startup entrepreneur who told me, I am sure that if we had a company building a hypersonic rocket, missile, I am quite sure Europe would not buy it. So how can we get decisions faster, make champions really play together, and bring startups up?
May I have a comment? Sorry. Because you mentioned SAFE. I don't know what are the final figures of SAFE, but we are speaking about billions of EU money to spend on defense. And I can tell you that for the Polish part of the program, 90% of the money will be spent for the European equipment. 9-0 for the European equipment. And we are talking about, in Polish case, like 42 billions. Yeah, I mean, we can spend it in Europe. This is first. The second, military procurement, to a very large extent, is governmental driven. It's not EU coordinated. But we have a very good relation. I mean, I'm speaking about Polish government with most of, if not all, the governments that are active in the military production. And some of the money will go to France. Some will go to Sweden. And we're also selling some military equipment to Germany and to France. So it is working.
You just convinced me that Weimar is working because you jumped before Minister Benjamin Haddad, so that he had not to answer. Thank you for that. Weimar is working.
I can maybe say a word on this. First, we don't have a Helsing drone, but I noticed that we have the colors of Ukraine above our head. So first, Poland is actually the first contributor beneficiary of SAFE, and it's a really good example. I think it's a good model because basically you say, we're going to put funding and we incentivize cooperation on specific areas where we have dependency. So I think we should just do more of this. I think that's a good way to go. And then let's be honest, when you want to do ambitious things, it's going to be complicated. And you need to find the right processes, the right governance. I'm willing to say the word you didn't want to say, but yes, we have a JET project, FCAS. I'm a big supporter of it. I think if we want to do standardization, synergies, simplification, and go to scale, then yes, we need a common jet. And having multiple jets in 20, 30 years would make much less sense. So these are difficult projects, of course, because once again, when you try to do ambitious things, they tend to be difficult. But I hope that we can bring the actors around the table, find solutions to move forward, because from a strategic standpoint, of course it makes sense. And it's one example, but there are other examples of cooperation across industry that are critical. I want to give you just another example. 2 days ago, we had the successful launch of Ariane 6 rocket. Space is so important. Having a sovereign access to space, when you think about data, telecommunications, security, and satellite, of course, when you look at the role that Starlink is playing in Ukraine. For agriculture, we need sovereign space solutions because otherwise we're going to be too dependent on American actors, whether that's private actors like SpaceX or Starlink, but are heavily subsidized by the US government. You see SpaceX, all the launches that are being funded by NASA above market prices. So let's not be naive and also support our own European actors. And in an area like space, if you go it alone, you're never going to be able to go to scale to be able to compete with the United States. You need European solutions.
You want to say something to FCAS? You just made a sign.
It is a general problem. The general problem is we are not efficient enough in European Union. And what I mean, we have almost 200 different weapon systems in Europe.
And the States have 30.
Exactly. And what is more efficient? And what is cheaper finally?
Yeah, we know that for years and you are not doing anything about that.
Yeah, because it is not think in a European dimension. This is the problem. We are thinking agriculture.
We are here. We are the,
wait.
We are the willing here.
Wait a second.
Willing.
Wait a second. We are agricultural politics. This has a European dimension. Economic politics too, but not defense politics. Because over decades, the national states made their own soup. This is the problem. So the problem is that we are now in another dimension of time. And by the way, because Macron was mentioned with the NATO that it was brain dead, it was in another time, and Macron did it as a wake-up call. It was a wake, as often Macron did it. He gave impulses for European discussions, and finally it happened also. Today, nobody would discuss about that NATO will be brain dead. But anyway, we have to think defense politics in a more European dimension. And it is not a problem of European Union. It is a problem of the national member states. There is the key, and this has to be solved, and this has to be overcome.
When we're talking about FCAS, it's especially a German-French project too. And Chancellor Merz, in his speech at the Munich Security Conference, didn't really mention France or like the strategic partnership with France. How would you say is right now, especially regarding the complications together with FCAS, the relationship between France and Germany? Is it still the motor of Europe?
First of all, Friedrich Merz, he mentioned a lot the transatlantic relationship, and I think it was the right weight also in his speech. It was necessary to say there's not master and servant, there are partners, and these partners are on the same level. This is what Benjamin mentioned at the very beginning, and this is the right attitude also to a transatlantic partnership. Second point, we have a lot of common projects, yes. Not only FCAS. I want only to remember to main ground combat system. To give you another example, or when we developed the A400M as transport plane. But we have also different traditions and industrial traditions in European Union. This has to be considered. In the case of FCAS, Dassault has a very prominent meaning. Now we are discussing because in our side and view, Dassault changed, not the politics, but Dassault changed the rule of the game. This cannot be accepted from our point of view, but we are in a discussion and hopefully fruitful. So we have a lot of common projects which we have to develop, and therefore our industry has to become closer and has to work closer together. And I will give you another example why it is so important. Also, our competition law in European Union is not always in favor. If it is not permitted for us to construct trains keyword is Alstom and Siemens, if it is not allowed, then we cannot expect to have one day European players or at least global players. We should look on the financial sector and so on and so on. Look on the 20 most or strongest banks in the world. And if you have nation flags in front, then you will see American flags or Chinese flags. This is the reality. We have to change. And therefore, it is necessary also to change the competition law on the level of the European Union. Otherwise, we will lose the competition with other sides of the world.
But would you now still say that France and Germany, that this is still the motor of the European Union?
It is once again not exclusive.
Okay.
And the same what I mentioned with the Triangle of Weimar is the same with France. Nothing will move in Europe if France and Germany are blocking each other. Nothing will move. So, of course, we can be the motor. And we are often with different initiatives. But let me say, there is the chance also in the future, of course, but not excluding other partners and other countries. And please think always on the so-called smaller countries in European Union. They should not be neglected.
Absolutely, I totally agree. Still, I think that when we're looking back at the process of the European Union, we saw that especially France and Germany, with this exclusively strong partnership, really also empowered other, especially smaller countries, to join in and to become a stronger force together. But I would certainly agree with you there.
Actually, we get signs from the delegation. So let me just have one, if you are okay with that, one final question out of the public, because it's very, I always want to have this interaction, but at least one question. Julien. Shin? Read. No.
Okay, like this. Sorry, I'm Julian. I'm from the European University Institute. I just have one question. So we have procurement issues in Europe. We have issues of different strategic importances given by different national member states. We have a question how the future of Europe looks like because there's political change on the horizon. And we have a problem that the biggest let's say, contributor to force multipliers and enablers in Europe, which is the US, might be leaving. Is it maybe not the time now for a 28th army, for a European army that, standardizes all these questions and delivers the force multipliers we need?
30 seconds for each of you.
It's an idea that's pushed by Commissioner Kubilius, and I think it's part of the conversation. It's interesting. Look, I mean, what do we need to do? First, we need to invest and build common capabilities. I think that's the priority. And so reduce the dependencies, put more money public, and liberate the private money as well. And I think that's key. Then I think there's a question of willingness to act. It's a question of mindset. When we talk about the coalition of the willing, it's really about putting countries together that say, okay, it's not an EU framework, it's not necessarily a NATO framework, it's just countries that are ready to act and support Ukraine. And then on the 20th Army, bringing armies together for specific missions, why not? But I think, once again, you know, sometimes we lose a bit of time focusing on theological debates about formats and how we call the structures, you know, because we've had battalions in the past and we don't use them. Let's just build things together and let's act.
Totally agree. And I would add that we need it. So we need closer cooperation between our militaries. We need to coordinate more when it comes to the supplies, when it comes to better alignment of the procurement procedures. But this is all discussion is all about. We're speaking about the role of the Weimarer Triangle in the closer cooperation of the European Union. The European Union was created as an mostly economic idea, but we are integrating more and more. And now with the threats and the changing dynamically world around, there is a need for the closer integration also when it comes to our internal and external security. So yeah, that's the moment to work closer, and that's the moment to integrate. And you will not have a European army from one day to another, but we need to work closely, and one day we will build it, I'm sure.
So Bundestag is able to vote for the European army? What do you think?
Well, first of all, then we have the role of the Constitutional Court in Germany, by the way. But let me say, we have already a lot of common missions. Not to forget, in NATO, but also in European Union. Altea, for example, in Bosnia-Herzegovina. It's a European mission. And we have also one common brigade, Benjamin, you know it very well, in Mulheim, Deutsch-Französische Brigade. And there I could imagine that especially this kind of brigade could play a much more prominent role than today. There's also a little bit space, but anyway, I think security has to be thinked together. And last point, external and internal security are coming closer and closer and closer together. When I only think on the outside border protection of the outside borders of European Union, give Frontex a more prominent role, make it to a real authority, not only it is situated in Warschau as an agency, as an European agency, it could play a much more prominent role. And so I share your opinion, there's a lot of space which can be developed, but it has to be thought together.
Let me finalize by quoting President Macron, who said the other day, "This is the right time for audacity. This is the right time for Europe." Do you believe in the Triangle of Weimar? Yes, we got more voices now. Thank you very much. Thanks for having us. And let's make a picture.